episode 32 of the Siege Show presented by Jake and Guzz. And as always, it's a big one, even more so with the reveal of Siege X. Now, to kick things off, this is a paid collaboration with Ubisoft. We're very, very fortunate that they've been able to get us involved in helping put content out around Siege X. And as we've alluded to in previous episodes, guys, of course, you've also been involved in the process behind the scenes and sort of all of the things that have been going on regarding Siege X. Now, I haven't been as privy. The reveal for me was the first time that I've actually been able to see footage and content and what it's really all about. And I'm excited to kind of dissect things with you. But you know, as we go through this, first and foremost, this should end up being a rather long episode. We've got a lot to get through. Where did all of this start when it comes to Siege X? Because I remember hearing murmurs, I think was it like mid or end of 23, regarding what many considered at the time maybe a potential Siege 2. We weren't quite sure what it would be, whether it's an update, whether it's a successor, a whole new game. But there were some murmurs that maybe there were some things happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, can talk about Siege X. As I sort of alluded to in the previous episode, we kind of heard from unofficial sources that there was a major upgrade coming to Siege, and that was, I think mid to late 2023. Again, coinciding with sort of the 3-year development window that Ubisoft themselves have mentioned. Didn't really hear specifics, didn't really know what to expect outside of a big upgrade / update. And then fast forward to August of 2024, so pretty much a full year later, we, and I guess I flew the flag on behalf of the two of us, Dev Marta and Paladin Amber for the Australian region, were invited over to Tokyo for a roadshow where we were presented with a full pitch deck on what to expect with Siege X, and then had the opportunity to playtest a very early build. I got this t-shirt. I can finally wear this t-shirt, Tokyo Roadshow 2024.
Where's mine?
I'm keeping that one.
Where's my t-shirt?
For a while. So yeah, that was really, really cool. And then most recently also had an opportunity to play the closed beta in a playtest last week or the week before. So yeah, I've had pretty intimate knowledge of Siege X for quite some time, alongside the other, I think it was like 100 total creators, I think, that got to early playtest. I believe we were the second roadshow. There was one prior to us. So yeah, I was a part of sort of the first like 20 odd people from the public that got to play Siege X, which was a really cool experience. Very grateful for that opportunity. It was a lot of fun to sort of see the behind the scenes. It was presented by, I believe it was the head of marketing for Siege and one of the developers. So obviously very knowledgeable, very passionate. We had an opportunity to ask questions, offer our feedback. And that insight will be weaved throughout this particular episode.
Obviously, there was a lot going on behind the scenes with this, and everything was supposed to be hush-hush, which I honestly believe for a project as big as this, with so many people as involved as there was, it was kept under wraps really, really well. And I mean, like, when you guys went over to Japan, you guys come back, I had no idea what you guys even did. Like, I don't know. And I think that that's a testament to everyone that was involved, from developers to content creators and such, that ultimately there was not ever a situation where I felt like the leaks really got a hold of things until maybe the very end. Like the very, very, very end. Yeah. We're talking weeks out, maybe. That's when things started to trickle a little bit. But considering how long this was in the pipeline, Guzz, like, everyone did a pretty good job to keep this under wraps.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the thing that really astounded me. I mean, it wasn't just obviously the 100 odd creators that were, heavily NDA'd and having to keep this under wraps. But as you mentioned, it would have been thousands of people. It was presented internally, etc., within the company, and it was, kept under wraps quite well up until the very, very end. I mean, again, going back to the sort of the Tokyo Roadshow, for instance, like, it was that under lock and key. When we get there and before the presentation, we had to sign the NDAs again, a hard copy. We had our phones locked away during the duration of the presentation, the playtest. So yeah, they're really trying to keep it under wraps, and I think for the most part it was pretty successful. Unless you were like a super hardcore Siege fan following leak accounts, I'm pretty sure you would have avoided most of the leaks, especially if you were sort of like a more casual fan. So yeah, overall kept under wraps nicely, and yeah, it was cool to see the presentation. I mean, I wasn't privy to what we saw in the roadshow last night, so in terms of how that was going to play out. So I was up at 4 a.m. and yeah, I was still excited.
Now, before we kind of get into the actual features and the breakdown of the reveal and what kind of Siege X is going to be all about, one of the more I don't know, pretty not controversial. I know it was probably not something you were a massive fan of initially, but the branding and the logo change. You've come around a little bit though, but initially you weren't quite too happy with the change. I don't mind it personally. But I can, whenever you're kind of changing with, a brand that's been around a long time, I think you're always going to get a little bit of apprehension when it comes to these kind of changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be very candid here. When I first saw, I think it was a part of the very first slide that we saw at the roadshow back in August. And my initial reaction was just like, this is not very good. And in fact, we had a Q&A portion after the presentation, and I'm pretty certain I was the first person to put my hand up and ask the question. And I was probably in hindsight a little bit blunt in the way that I approached it, but I basically asked, like, is this logo final or is this a placeholder? And I was told that this is a final, and I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't a huge fan of it at the time, and I'm still not now, but I have come around a little bit. I think that the Siege X typeface, like the red font, is actually not too bad. I don't mind it all that much. I think that the bullet casing in the 6 logo as opposed to the pistol that we have now still looks a little bit strange, but as you sort of mentioned, any brand change for any notable brand, like in the history of brands in general, you change stuff and it takes people a while to come around. So it's not the absolute end of the world. It's not going to ruin my experience. It is what it is. It's probably not as bad as I initially thought, but whatever. I don't really care.
You come around. You do naturally kind of come around to these things. The more you see it, you start to see it on merchandise and in the game and things like that. And as you become more accustomed to it, and you also, I guess, slowly but surely see a little bit less of the old logo, it does integrate eventually. And I think that will be the case. I personally don't mind it. I think it's fine. And I also think it's just always going to be one of those instances where you're not going to be able to please everyone. There are people out there that really like it, and there are people out there that really don't like it. It's just natural. You're going to get mixed responses to these things. And so even if it's the most amazing logo ever, you'll probably still find people that don't like it. Either way, that doesn't really matter too much. It is just a logo after all. I don't think it's going to define the success of Siege X, which we get into some of the features. Now, first and foremost, I have always been an advocate and a big fan of the fact that it's not Siege 2, a different game or anything along those lines of that. Because again, going back to the murmurs in 23, some of those murmurs were like, is this a Siege 2? Is this a successor? Is this a sequel? And I didn't necessarily want that because I think you've seen previously, honestly, failures when it comes to that with these live service games like Overwatch into Overwatch 2, Counter-Strike, even into Counter-Strike 2. I don't think any of those have actually gone really all that successful. They've had their hiccups. Now, those games are so large and so massive that they've maintained success throughout, but they've certainly taken a hit. And I don't think Siege was in a position to be able to take that hit and survive and come out the other end. I think that this is much better for them to be able to just say, hey, this is just an update to our game as it is, and we'll move forward. But the question to that, because of the update that we've gotten, it's called Siege X, is it going to be called Siege X forever? Like, does it eventually just revert back, like after 2, 3, 4, 5 years to just Rainbow Six Siege? Like, is it just Siege X forever now? Like, that's actually a question I haven't really had an answer to.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I was under the impression that the name would just last for the 10th year and then it would go back to Siege.
Right. Which I think is probably the way it should be.
I think it should be. I agree. I think it's nice to have like a 10-year anniversary branding and then revert back to just Siege, but I'm not sure. Yeah,
I'm not sure either. And even if you were sure, you might not be able to say anything. That's just part of the problem.
I think I remember hearing about this, but yeah, I guess there should be probably a bit of a disclaimer on this episode. There is definitely stuff that I do know that I still can't talk about because it's not public, but
yeah,
I will do my best to talk as much as possible.
Now, I think that when it comes to Siege X, in my mind, I've always kind of looked at this as a glorified and even to a higher level like Operation Health. If you think back to Siege back in the day when the game was struggling, they essentially took a lot of resources away from further development and said, we're just going to fix the game. And it was, I think, probably widely considered the best update Siege has really ever had. in terms of coming out the other side and just being better for it. And the beauty of Siege X, to my knowledge at least, is that it's not as if we have to sacrifice, a full 12-month calendar of content for this update that we're getting in terms of revitalizing the game's engine. And I think that in itself is something that does need to be kind of spoken about, is that you're getting such a massive update and you're not losing really all that much anyway for it, and you're going to gain a lot for it in the future. So you go to obviously the map visual upgrades first and foremost, a lot of it coming through, I think, in the lighting department. I've seen a lot of the hype from fans talking about the lighting upgrades, and especially in a game where it's a competitive shooter, you need to have good lighting. Counter-Strike is a great example with CS2, where the lighting was their number one overhaul, because you just don't want to end up in a situation like CSGO, which started to look dated because the lighting was just, quite frankly, awful. If you actually go back and watch some CSGO, it really does
so
look
bad.
It does look like a game made in 2012. And I think that's kind of the crux that Siege was getting to, right? Like, you give it 1 or 2 more years and it's like, wow, this looks really outdated. And it's not just the current lighting that has been updated, but the engine itself now provides for better updates in future. I will say that the lighting is perfect, guys. I don't know if the rest of the map visuals, to me, at least in the reveal, looked as if they were massively overhauled. Now, I don't know what you can talk about or what you can say. You've played it. Do you feel a noticeable difference in the server as you're playing the game?
Yeah, I mean, picking up briefly on your first point about engine upgrades, there was a lot of just misinfo in the community leading up to this reveal that this was going to be a brand new engine. It was going to be on Snowdrop or whatever the Division engine is, and all this just like pure noise. I mean, that was just rubbish. The game engine is not the exact same engine that was used back in 2015. Like, people really need to wrap this around their heads. Game engines are constantly internally updated. And this is being confirmed by developers publicly on Twitter. It's not the exact same engine. They continue to work on it. An engine is not static. It's just like the game. It gets updated. And perhaps those upgrades have allowed for the changes in the game now. I can't confirm that, but I would assume it would probably make sense. As for map visual upgrades, so unfortunately, especially on stream, it's really difficult to actually appreciate the changes because of just the limitations of live streaming on bit rates and resolutions. I promise people, the second you load into the game, especially if you're playing on at least 1440p, night and day, like absolutely night and day. I've seen, especially on TikTok for some reason, so many people spamming like it looks like a mobile game. Again, because you're watching on your phone on a TikTok video. In game, it looks completely different. Okay. Wood looks like wood. Soft floor has like proper texture to it. The textures are way better. Now, I've heard claims that the beta, and I suppose by extension the builds that I've played, has the 4K resolution installed by default, and that's optional on release. I can't confirm if that's actually true or not, or if what they're running at the moment is just the regular textures. And maybe that goes to the performance of the game as well. So I don't know. Maybe it is only the 4K textures at the moment. That's why it looks so good, and then you'll be able to tone it down later and get better performance. I can't confirm, but definitely looks a lot better. That in combination with the lighting, the game looks far better. And it doesn't have the same issues that old lighting has. I've seen, again, some people saying, oh, they've just brought back old lighting and saying it's new again. No. If you're saying that, you did not play the old game. The old lighting, the shadows were black. You couldn't see anything. And if you looked outside, it was pure white. You couldn't see anyone rappelling outside or on skylights. It was just an extreme contrast. It was not competitive. It was not fun to play. And it just wasn't even realistic anyway, like people claim it to be. I think this new system finds a much better balance. And in combination with things like enemy outlines, which we'll discuss later, that's its whole thing. It retains the competitiveness of the game while upping the immersion and bringing the game in line with a 2025 standard. It looks far closer to the likes of a Counter-Strike 2. And I would actually argue in some respects, it probably looks a little bit better. I don't know if you agree, but to me, Counter-Strike 2 sometimes has this really like plasticky feel on some maps. Like the textures have that like, I don't know if it's the shine
it's
or
less gritty
what,
and more shine.
It has that really weird, like uncanny feel to it sometimes. Like everything's too clean. I don't know exactly what it is or if it's the reflections or what, but in Siege, I think it retains that sort of grittiness a little bit better. It does still probably have more of a plasticky feel than the old build did, but it's a big upgrade.
Yeah. Now we're not shills though, and we're like, for those that have followed this podcast, we use a lot of references to games like Counter-Strike 2, especially as a tactical FPS competitor. And again, Counter-Strike 2 being a really good reference point, as they recently did a pretty large update. And you look at kind of the way that they also handle things like smokes and incendiaries. Are we getting that level of update for Siege X? No.
No.
Which is very disappointing, because I think, like, you look at, again, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and you go back and look at those smokes. Now, at the time, when did CSGO finish? Was it 23? 2023?
So,
yeah, so around that point. At that point in time, it was never something that was in your mind about, like, oh, these look fucking awful. Like, these are awful. But once they got updated, you're like, holy shit, these were awful. Yeah. And I think that's something that Siege may end up happening, whether it's you start to see all these other things improved. It's like, well, these smokes still look really bad and outdated. And that has to be something that I hope in future they look at and say, it doesn't need to be like a whole brand new Siege X, but in future they might be like, hey, we fixed the smokes and the incendiaries. I hope that's something that can happen in future, and they're not just going to be left the way that they are.
Yeah, I mean, again, this sort of coincides with the fire extinguishers and the gas pipes that have been added as destructible mapping elements. So you have the smoke and the flames, respectively. As far as I can tell, the animation / texture / sprites or whatever look the same as the old build, and that was a little bit disappointing to me. I agree with you. I think, if possible, especially if they're able to refine the performance of the game, because keep in mind, CS2 is still dog shit performance, and the smokes and the flames, even to an extent, just fucking kill performance. Like, it's really bad, and we don't want that in Siege. So if they can find a way to implement a similar system that doesn't tank performance, it'd be massive. Imagine volumetric smokes that actually fill a space properly. You can shoot and see through them properly. I think it would be really great in a game like Siege. When you think about it, it would be incredible. It would be massive. I can only assume that either it just is something they're not interested in, or it's not technically possible at the moment. But hopefully something that can happen in future. I mean, another point we have here as well is just a minor point. They added first-person shadows, so you can see your own shadow. And again, with some of the light sources, that's a cool addition.
Well, how was the PC performance though when you played it? Did it feel clean? I mean, what were the computer specs as well that you played on in Tokyo?
I don't know what we played in Tokyo, and that was a really old build, so honestly, I can't really remember the performance being that bad. I will say, actually, I mean, that's something I didn't mention, is that when we played the 6v6 mode in Tokyo, we were playing a fully untextured map of District, the 6v6 map. So it was literally white boxes everywhere. There was not a single texture on the map. So obviously performance was going to be
amazing,
far better than it is with the texture, with the textured map. Also a lot more confusing. It was just like you're running around into white boxes all the time. I can speak from my experience though. Last week again, we had closed beta access. So I'm running an i9 9900KS, which I've OC'd to 5 gigahertz, and a 3090 with DDR4 RAM. So kind of shitty specs. I'm looking to upgrade my CPU soon. And on 6v6, I think I was getting about 140 FPS. And then on like 5v5 maps running around solo custom, probably dropping about 50-ish to maybe 100 frames compared to current builds. So there is a pretty significant drop. A lot more GPU utilization, which makes sense. And I think I am definitely still CPU bound. So something I'm looking into. I think I have seen a decent number of complaints about performance, and I think some of them rightly so. Again, important to remember, we're 3 months out from a release. There will be optimizations. But a lot of the complaints I'm seeing are from people. Well, I'm expecting there to be.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Everyone said that about Counter-Strike, though.
I'm not expecting it to gain 50 frames, but I think they'll reduce some of the stuttering issues and stuff. But again, I'm going to be like the bad guy in the room for a second. I'm seeing some people complain that they're not getting like 140 FPS plus like competitive frame rates on GPUs that are 6 years old. I feel like there needs to be a bit of give here, that if you want to see the game, brought into the modern era, you probably need to be operating under the assumption that you need hardware that's at least like 3 or 4 years old maximum, right? Yeah, I'm seeing people even on, I think like late 10 series are trying to get the game to perform better than like 60 FPS.
Come on.
I understand like not everyone is in a position to have the best hardware in the world. I'm not saying, you should be going out and buying a 5090 tomorrow, because fuck that, I'm not doing that. But yeah, if you're going to see the game upgraded, there needs to be a bit of push and shove elsewhere. Again, I still hope they optimize it a little bit better. Some of the stuttering and stuff has been far from ideal.
There's only so much you can do, like to play devil's advocate.
I think for the upgrades you're getting, like
yeah.
it's not the it's. I think it could have been a worse performance hit. Again, I feel like we use CS2 as an example all the time, but that game was like, you think the Siege optimization is bad, losing 50 frames, bro? CS is like less than half of what you were getting on
CS
Go,
went from like 800 FPS and
to like 100.
Yeah, like
I'm getting like 100 frames on fucking CS.
I
150
have
max. I'm
a
getting double that in Siege.
4090 3900K, which not very long ago would have been considered the best, except that, I mean, I guess AMD with the X3Ds are better for CS, but I struggle to hit my 360 FPS mark. Although, to be fair, I also play on like max settings, but like a computer, like, you know, like that should be very much hitting very high numbers. And in Siege, you know, typically it does do that. I think it also, like, you know, and sidetracking a little bit here, it's just the nature of being an older head. When I was younger, you actually only needed to reach 60 FPS. In any game you played, because all the monitors were 60 hertz. So we're in a different era now. Some people are fine to hit 120 or 144 because that's all their monitor refresh rate is. Then others are up to 240 or 360. So obviously you've got different metrics. Then you've got some that are playing on a 4K monitor. Well, yeah, you're not going to get as much performance, or 2K monitor. You know, so like you have to understand everyone's in a different position. And when it comes to developers and they're trying to optimize a game that's trying to suit the entire consumer base, that's just not going to be possible. You're going to have people playing on old hardware, 1080s, for example, which are now considered old hardware. Great graphics card for its time, but it's outdated. Even the 20 series now.
8 years old.
Yeah. So even the 20 series now is outdated, right? It really should, the vast majority, if you're, you know, really into competitive gaming, 30 series or minimum really should be, you know, where you're at.
I think my opinion would be this. I think everyone deserves to be able to run the game at least 60 FPS on hardware that still supports the game now. But again, if you're complaining about not getting 140 plus, which puts you in, you'd be surprised, like a pretty high percent, a pretty small percentage of players that are sort of demanding that and care about that frame rate, then you probably need to realign your hardware to adjust for that. It sucks. Like, I'm not saying it's great, and I wish we could all fucking play the game at 600 FPS on a 1080, but that's just how technology works.
That's not how hardware works.
It's just physically not possible for the game to be rendering how it is with that kind of hardware, unfortunately.
Now, another update, and one that I'm excited about, is the audio overhaul. That was a big part and a big feature of the reveal, which, you know, audio in shooters in general has always been a very maligned topic. Like, I don't know, I can't remember if you ever played Tarkov, but Tarkov's always been a big one when it comes to audio because of the nature of that game. Any kind of movement is super important. You have to hear what's around you because it's just a big part of, you know, they call it audio whoring, where you kind of just sit and just listen. Super important. And Counter-Strike as well, right? When Counter-Strike 2 came out, it was all about the audio upgrade that they received as well. But two pretty much mixed results. Like, a lot of people were saying that they couldn't hear as well in terms of sound direction when it came to Counter-Strike 2. Everyone's changing all their settings, yada, yada, yada. Audio is very, very difficult to get right. Very difficult to get right. And again, it kind of goes back into the conversation regarding people's setup and hardware. You got some people that are using mixers, some people that are using USB headsets, some people have stereo, mono, some people actually have spatial sound.
Speakers.
Some people are on speakers. You can't get the right product again for everyone, but I'm very curious to see. I think the big thing is, and you've got it listed here beautifully, the reverb and the travel through walls. And Siege is a game that has a lot of sound going on and a lot of good information that you can gain from sound. So if they do this right, it could very well be actually the biggest update for Siege X would be the sound.
Yeah. Again, there were probably the two major things that really stood out to me when I very first got my hands, especially on the build last week, was one, the texture quality. The maps look far newer, and the biggest thing you will notice the first time you shoot a gun is the sound. It is completely different. The biggest reason for that, especially when you're shooting your own weapon, is the reverb. So sound now travels relative to the size of the room that sound is being emitted from. I mean, take a very quick step back. I think the video they showed in the reveal was not a very good demonstration. it would have been far better to just have somebody literally running around shooting. It would have demonstrated a lot better, which is the example that I saw. So yeah, going back to the point, reverb massive. Like if you go to a closet and you shoot, no echo as you would expect. You start shooting in bank lobby, it pings around like crazy. And that difference is very noticeable in gameplay. There's going to be an adjustment period, obviously, and I'm still going through that myself.
Sorry to interrupt you there for a second, but from the other side of it then, right? Say you're a defender and you hear someone shooting in lobby, are you more likely that they're going to sound louder than, say, someone, say, in elevator shooting?
I can't speak specifically on loudness, but the reverb and the echo is the most noticeable difference. Yeah, so there's going to be an adjustment period that I and many are going through until we can actually definitively say if the accuracy is good, because we're not used to it. Like it's basically like gaining sound again for the first time as a new sense. It's going to take, I think, a few weeks to adjust to it before we can definitively say how much more or like it's less accurate it actually is. I haven't played enough, competitively and been paying that much close attention to.
There's going to be situations then, and this is a preemptive warning to the community,
where people are going to shit on the audio. Yes,
but you're going to have some people, based on a certain scenario or situation, they're going to shit on the audio because they're used to the old audio. So something will happen and they'll be like, wait, what the fuck? Like, oh, this audio sucks. On the vice versa, and this is why you don't always look too much at the positives or the negatives. There's going to be people who are like, wow, I got this kill or this happened because of the new audio. It's fucking amazing. And how good's the audio, blah, blah, blah. So it's going to be two-pronged. You're just naturally going to see people dealing with something that's brand new, and you're going to have the big positives and the big negatives. The hope for me is that the middle ground is an upgrade, that the median use of this tech is going to be an upgrade versus the old sound system. There's going to be certain areas, I'm sure, which may have some weaknesses, and certain areas that may have some strengths. But the hope is that on average, your average playing experience, it will be better. And I'm assuming from your playtest, did it feel like that's got the potential to do that?
I think it has the potential. It certainly feels more immersive as opposed as for competitiveness and, I guess more importantly, reproducibility. I mean, we need to all play more to be able to provide feedback on that. Because again, just to make it very clear, the old sound system, basically sound traveled through the nearest hole to it. So if there was like a small hole in the floor and someone was shooting above, it would come through that hole, not necessarily through the actual walls itself. Now it, propagates through walls. And so, again, I don't know how it's developed. I don't know how it's actually produced, but I'm going to assume, and I've actually seen a couple of clips on Reddit where some sounds are acting weird. It's probably going to be more buggy, especially initially, right? Like I think on paper and from behind the scenes look, it's a far more complex system, right? So yes, Siege has its bugs and has dealt with multiple bugs over a long period of time, but that's because some of these systems are incredibly complex. When you're dealing with a map that has destructibility and then trying to layer on audio that reacts to that in real time, it's probably going to lead to issues. And I think there's probably going to be bugs that need to be ironed out. But if it works as intended, it should overall be a very significant upgrade, which is exciting.
So over to the dual front game mode, which this is a big one and one that I had absolutely no idea about. What was your first reaction when you see this and you get told about this and you play this? Were you nervous? Were you like, wait, are they changing the whole game? Did they tell you straight away that no, this is just a side thing? Like this is not going to be the core Siege experience?
Yes, I think it was back in 2023 when we found out about the upgrade. There was like I think I heard some murmurs about it being like a MOBA inspired mode, and I was pretty intrigued to see what that might look like. And then fast forward to Tokyo and we see the presentation and it kind of clicked. I was like, oh, okay, this must be the mode. It looks kind of cool. It was made out very clearly, like it was in the reveal last night, that it is a separate, dedicated, permanent mode. So it's not detracting from core Siege, and it's not going to be a limited time mode. It's intended to be a new experience, and I think it was very much pitched as one catered towards especially new players and more casual players, and especially potential players that are a little bit hesitant to try Siege because it is, a very high barrier to entry. This mode is intended to offer an experience that is a little bit more, forgiving and engaging. So I guess by extension, it's probably not a mode that's really marketed or targeted towards myself, but I still thought it was an interesting concept. I like the idea that attack and defense is, on the same roster. The objectives are simultaneous. There's always something to do in the mode. Even if you die, you can still drone. So it was exciting. The playtest itself, as I mentioned back in Tokyo, we were playing on a completely untextured map. We got to see a preview of the textured version back then. It was about 2/3 done, I think, and it looked pretty cool at the time. But again, we were just playing on white boxes. And when you think about the scale of the map, very easy to get lost, especially without the the textures to help guide you through the map. And so, yeah, the playtest itself was interesting. It was definitely frustrating at times. We also didn't have a full English-speaking team, and that sort of coincides with my point about this mode. I don't know how engaging and exciting it will be if you're solo queuing. I think as a stack, if you find yourself in a team that actually wants to, I hesitate to say the word sweat, but want to coordinate, and you're in a relatively balanced matchup that's close with the enemy team, the mode's fucking sick. Like, I think it's really, really good. But at its worst, if you have just people just running around randomly, there's zero coordination, the game's not competitive or close, it's poor. So I think a lot of it is dictated by who you play with and who you play against. Whereas, the core mode itself is pretty.
How would
pretty
you
cool.
liken it to solo queuing something like a Call of Duty? I feel like Call of Duty is the kind of game you just load up as a solo, chuck some music on, run around, click heads. Like, it doesn't fit that role.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people sort of compare the two. And again, goes back to my point. I think you sort of get out what you put in. If you just want to solo queue, put on music and run around like it's a COD, you can have that experience. But equally, if you are someone that really enjoys the sort of tactical nature of Siege and likes the tense gameplay, you can get that from this mode if you play it in that fashion. It is possible. You don't have to run around like it's COD. I can promise you that from, in the playtest, like a couple weeks ago, like in some of the teams that I was on, I hate to be like that guy in the stack, but I was kind of sweating a little bit and, starting to min-max some of the strats and like making calls on, who should be attacking when, who should be defending here. Should we go for the neutral objective? Is it worth it? Should we go reinforce here ahead of time? What operators should we bring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can really think quite deeply about this mode. And I think it offers a good opportunity for people to, warm up, cool down, et cetera. I would even go as far as to say if they wanted to implement some kind of ranked system to the mode and actually entice people to take it seriously, that could even be viable, but I don't really think that's the intention of the mode anyway.
What about if there's a world in which it becomes incredibly popular? Like, do you see a world in which it becomes incredibly popular and that it could even overtake the main? No, you wouldn't even.
No, I don't think so. I mean, they mentioned in the presentation, right, that so it's a curated operator pool. It's not every operator available for the entire time. I think they say they're refreshing it twice per season, if I remember correctly. So that will be a way to sort of artificially prop it up and get people back in. And
so it really
trying
is
it again.
for fun and go in and have fun.
Again, if you want to treat it seriously, I think you can, and you get a lot out of it. At least me, because I consider myself to be very competitive. But equally, if you're super casual and you're just wanting to have a fun time and run around or chill with friends after a rank session or whatever, I think that mode also provides that experience. I mean, I still think it does have some potential shortfalls. Like, I know in a lot of our playtests, one of the big feedbacks were from myself and fellow players were that maybe there's not enough players. 6v6 might not be enough. I don't think from a technical standpoint, though, you'd be able to push the boundary and add too many more players. I don't think that would be particularly viable and probably
What
get
about a
too
reduction?
chaotic,
Can you make it a 4v4, 5v5? Do you think that's something that they could
the map's
do? Too big?
The map's too big. I think a way to maybe complement it would be to have some kind of like PvE element to it. I don't know what that would look like. I know you've got the neutral objective with the hostage capture now, but maybe some way that, like in League, like you can go clear camps
like
or whatever. Maybe
or something
like, maybe like something like that. I think that could be an interesting gameplay element, and maybe something that could get explored in future, just to sort of flesh out the map a little bit, because it is such a large map that sometimes it
What
can
about
be
something like Extraction, then,
empty.
which was, of course, a big PvE mode that we saw come out of Rainbow Six? Like, do you think that there's a way in which you could try and do a hybrid?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, if it's PvPvE, I feel like that could be an interesting element. But again, like, that's adding another huge layer. It's not like you can just tick a checkbox and add AI. Like, it would be a massive amount of development investment to add that, if that's something that they're even considering. I think it would be a nice to have, though.
What about the perception, and this is just my own perception right now, initially on face value of, watching the reveal, seeing this new mode. Siege is by no means like the most popular game in the world. It's got a really large player base, but what about this now being something that could split up the player base a little bit? You're taking players away from like casual and ranked and things like that. And then, you think about regions such as Australia. Is that something that you perceive could be an issue?
Yeah, I think in minor regions it probably will be. I don't think in populated ones it's going to impact queue times negatively at all. So I'm not too concerned.
Like, do you shut the mode off at like midnight? There are games that do like League of Legends. League of Legends did it even back in the day. You think back when they used to have like Twisted Tree Line and stuff. They used to shut that off at like midnight or whatever time it may be. Like, there were periods where particular game modes actually got turned off so that people kind of more so funneled into the core game. So that's something I'll keep my eye on. Because there's a lot of resources that go into these kind of things. I'm not prepared to just dive in and say, well, this thing's going to be a huge success, because you always have to be careful when you're creating a secondary mode to a main game that is essentially a live service game. And I've seen this enough. I recall League of Legends back in the day had a game mode come out. It was the first thing they did was called Dominion. You would have been quite young at the time, guys, when it came out. I think it was
I've never heard of this.
Yeah. So it was a whole separate game mode to Summoner's Rift. And at the beginning, it was kind of fun, it was kind of cool, but by no means was this ever going to replace Summoner's Rift. And after years and years and years, eventually they just kind of canned it because, like, it lost the player base, it wasn't part of the main game. Like, why have this? And that's kind of my concern, is there's a lot of resources going into this. Now, I really hope it's fun and it creates player base. And the best part that you could get out of this is maybe it has a way of reaching a new audience to introduce people to Siege. If it doesn't do that, if it doesn't get people into Siege and increase the player base by offering a new part of our game, then I actually may look at it as a failure overall. I think it could be the biggest weak link of Siege, and it could also be one of the biggest strengths of Siege X.
I think the success of the game mode in isolation is unimportant. If the game mode itself dies in 2 years, who gives a shit? On the provision that it brought in new players alongside the free-to-play model and encouraged them to learn the game in that more friendly and more forgiving environment, and then they transition to 5v5. If that's a success and the 6v6 mode eventually withers out, I don't give a shit. It's done its job. And I would hesitate to say that's maybe the intention of the mode. I mean, I think they're very much keeping saving face and saying that it is a permanent mode to be here forever. I don't know if that is actually a realistic goal.
Nothing's ever here forever. Nothing's ever here forever. The big thing for me is it'll become a failure if they continue to apply resources into it and taking resources away from the main game. And I think that you think to when X Defiant kind of got brought out, and a lot of people panicked a bit because they were like, oh, well, that's going to take resources away from Siege. We know, of course, it didn't. But this actually is in Rainbow Six Siege. Like, this actually can take resources away because you're putting time. You have to make maps for this thing, and the maps can't translate. Like, you have to,
the maps, I believe, are just going on. I don't know how frequently or what the format is, but from what I understand, it is just the district map that receives, like, iterations. So it's not like they're making these massive new maps every single time. So that does relieve some of the workload. But you are right. There's upkeep, right? It's going to have bugs. It's going to have issues. The operator pool needs to be curated. It's a whole nother matchmaking service that they need to maintain. Like,
it's more servers as well. You got to pay for the servers, So, like, I mean, I'm happy to come into this and say I think this is a fine addition, and I think it can be successful. But I'm also being very realistic and logical about it, that it can have its negatives. And even if you wanted to be super pessimistic, it may be more likely that the negatives overwhelm the positives in the long run. I hope that doesn't happen. I'm sure it's certainly going to be fun, and hopefully it does pan out. And I think the biggest way that it becomes a success, as we've kind of touched on, and to close on this, is if it can bring people into Siege, then it's already done its job. And from there, the rest is pretty much irrelevant. There was something I actually did notice in the reveal was the esports tab menu. Now I don't know if there's any more you can kind of talk about this because it wasn't. It was in there, but it wasn't spoken about. It wasn't highlighted.
Yeah, unfortunately, they didn't really talk about it. It is something that was presented back in August, and there are a couple of ideas pitched as to sort of what they wanted to add into that particular tab, which is interesting. I think people can sort of expect the usual kind of stuff that you would see in an esports menu. I think probably Valorant is the closest example to what you can kind of expect with Siege without getting into too many specifics. Again, they did have like a couple of different experimental ideas on top of that, which I didn't see in the build of the closed beta, but it had very limited stuff in it. So it may well still be hidden away somewhere and they're adding, you know, the stuff that I'm thinking about, but unfortunately can't mention. My biggest hope, and I can speak on this because I have no idea if it's actually coming. The number one thing I really hope it has is an easy way to access replays. I should be able to go on that tab, click APAC League and click week 2 Chiefs v Cyclops or whatever, and bang, watch the game. That would be massive. They could go another step further and enable like live demos, but obviously that would be a massive technical undertaking. That would be cool. No idea if that's ever happening. I genuinely have no idea. But irrespective, having an esports tab in the game, great. It's been a long time coming. Esports, whether people want to admit it or not, is integral to the success of this game.
Big, yeah, it's huge.
And it's good to have it finally integrated into the client permanently.
Yeah. I'm very hopeful. I mean, like, you don't have to do too much when it comes to like an esports tab menu. As long as you do the basics and the basics are done well, then you can always expand on it. As you said, I think it would be massive if you can certainly just go to a game, click it, and then you're just in there and you can, even if you can observe around or whatever it may be, or even if you just can have the player POVs, things like that, I think it'd be really cool to be able to, you know, like let's say during a 6 Invitational, you know, you got like a FaZe v Furia and you can just go and click the perspective of someone like Handy and just see how he plays the game and you know, get that. I think that'd be awesome in terms of a replay file. I think that would be cool. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, you can get VODs of like the actual esports broadcast online, Twitch, YouTube, etc. So like you're already going to be able to get that experience. I think being able to get an in-game experience would be awesome for viewers. Weapon inspect next in the list here, guys, which we got a glimpse of in the reveal. I mean, it's nothing crazy, like it's not, you know, huge or anything, but it is a nice little addition. I think it's cool to be able to flex and have a quick little look. Is it intuitive though? And I'll use CS2 as an example. You know how like you, when you're running around in CS, you're almost like spamming your inspect button with your knife or with your gun or whatever. Is it clean like that? Like, is it smooth?
I would actually say it's better than Counter-Strike.
Really?
For maybe not the first person perspective animations, but you can see when a teammate or like when somebody else is inspecting, you know,
right.
in CS,
they just stand there. Yeah.
In Siege, you can see it, which is fucking sick. I was like, wow, that's really, really cool.
So you know if they're just fucking around inspecting their gun and not covering you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's intuitive, right? Like if you're inspecting and then you shoot, like bang, like it's straight back there as it would normally be, exactly like Counter-Strike.
Okay.
The animations themselves have like weight to them. I think they're really well made. They're certainly better than that like weird CS2 AK animation they added a few weeks back and reverted. Like that was shit. These ones are really solid, and it's nice. I mean, so many of the skins, especially the esports ones, have like a ton of detail that you have never really been able to appreciate. So
that's true. That's true.
Really, it's really, really nice.
I wonder if they've had to like backtrack some of those skins a little bit. Maybe there were certain areas that just you couldn't naturally see in the game. I guess not, because you got the like when you're buying the skin, you can kind of move it around
when they drop on the ground and stuff as well. Like,
true. I think it's just nice. It's a neat little addition. Like it's a quality of life in some ways, where it's just this is something that a lot of other games have.
Completely optional. Does not impact the gameplay. If you're a purist and you hate that
unbind
shit, just don't even bind it. I think it's bound to like I by default. So it's like, unless you put it on something
I'm
obscure,
sure there's going to be one guy out there that's just complaining about all I see is people inspecting. I need to be able to not see their inspections. I don't like grow up. Old man yells at clouds. Like it's good. Tactical FPS games have these things. We just need to be able to do knife inspects as well.
At the end of the day, it's a live service game. It's not free to run. Ubisoft is a public company. We talk about this all the time. They need to make money. We live in a capitalist system, they need to make money. And by doing this, by adding these inspect animations, it actually gives you more value for the money that you have spent in the fucking game.
Can Siege get to a point, you reckon, where we can have the knife out running around and get gamma Dopplers?
I should have asked that at the roadshow. I didn't think of it at the time. I was like, hey, like, surely it's not that hard, right? Like, you should just be able to hold, like, there's obviously a knifing animation now. What if you just hold knife and then you were able to run around with
you
your
hold
knife?
it and it's just, and then you start doing this and it's like got your skin.
Yeah.
Oh, could you imagine?
I tell you what, get us on the brand team for Siege. You'd make millions.
Although you'd probably be pissed if you're just like running, like Siege probably is not quite the game you're running around with your knife out.
It would be a bit trolly though. Yeah.
Veteran rewards was one that we saw, and I'm a little bit on the fence when it comes to this. I know you're happy because you got the 2015.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Xbox account, which you'll get the cross progression, but. Like, so there was the badge first and foremost. There was also a bunch of the rewards you get based on what year you kind of started playing Siege. The badge itself, I was very disappointed. I feel like they could have done more. I really felt like they could have done a little bit more with the badges. So I can understand if you started playing in 24, 23, 22, you're probably not going to get the coolest badge. I started in 2018, which was only a couple of years.
2018 was like the biggest year for the game too.
And it's like the badge looks the same as if I started in 24. It's only 2016 and 2015 that have a slight change. I really, really feel like they could have gone like almost Call of Duty prestige icon levels. Like, let's get some really cool fucking shit going on. I want 2015 to look like fucking amazing. And sure, 2024 maybe to not look as good. But like, I don't see a reason why 2018 and 17 and 19 just look like arse. Like, I feel like you could have done something really, really cool there. And hopefully there's still time for that. But overall, it is still nice to retroactively say thank you to the players that have been around a long time. You'll also have some players that will come back to the game based on Siege X coming out, and they'll be like, oh, well, look, I've got a 2016 badge now. This is really cool. It does also mean for new players who have only just started playing, say, post-COVID or anything, they're not really getting a lot from this. They may feel somewhat slighted a little bit. Not that that's anyone's fault. It's just the case of you're kind of giving stuff out to people. There's always going to naturally be people who don't then also receive these kind of things, right? Like, so you're probably going to see some community negative sentiment, just a little bit, not a huge amount, but naturally, if you give people something and other people don't get it, they're not going to be happy. Like, that's just truth.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'm.
You're not in this conversation. You're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm operating under the assumption that cross progression counts. I mean, like, I've got my year one charms, so I'm assuming that it's going to register that my account was in 2015. I played the beta. I didn't get the game on release because I was a broke 15-year-old. I think I used my Christmas money and went down to EB Games on Boxing Day and got the game. So yeah, I think I unlocked my first achievement on like the 27th of December. I had a quick look back, 2015. So yeah, excited for that. There's also that like cool year one skin. Unfortunately, it's not universal, which sucks a little bit. I think it would have been a nice touch to have those skins actually be universal, but not the absolute end of the world. But yeah, it's nice to say thank you to especially the OG players, because again, for those who might be new gens, the game almost didn't survive longer than a year or two. So it's pretty remarkable that we've made it this far.
I think it was obviously 2018 when I started playing it, and it felt to me at that point in time, I hadn't really known much about Siege, and yet it had surprisingly been out for 3 years. Like, yeah, I was just like, well, where's this game been? And you go back and look at footage of like 2015 Siege versus even just 2018 Siege, and it's like night and day. Like 2025 Siege is so much closer to 2018 Siege than 2018 to 2015, right? So like, it's quite fascinating the evolving and change that we saw in Siege in just the opening 2 to 3 years, that a lot of games don't survive these days. Like, we just saw actually Spectre Divide got shut down. Right? Like, games come out and get shut down. X Defiant is a great example, unfortunately. Games come out these days and they don't last 2-3 years to even get the opportunity to do an Operation Health, to revitalize the game and to stay strong. That it's amazing that Siege has made it to 10 years. And so I think it's great. Reward your veterans, as they call them. But I very much would like to, like, that you could have done it in a retroactive way. Like, there's two ways you could have done it. The way that they did it, which is based on the year you joined, and then the second way they could have done it, guys, is based on your actual longevity. So let's say you hit 10 years, it doesn't matter when you started, as long as you hit
like
your 10 years.
play time or something.
So there are other games that do that. Like, I mean, Counter-Strike does it with their badge, little pin badge that you get, where it's like you got your 10 years or whatever. I think RuneScape used to do something like that as well, where it's like after you've played for 10 years, you get a certain cape or whatever. And I think that's something that Siege could have done, is that after every single year you get, you know, that next reward track, if you will. It's like, okay, I've played 5 years, I get this item. I've played 6 years, I get this item. And then say after 10 years, you get that Black Eye skin or whatever that you get in 2015. That would have been a way where, like, for me personally, just using me as an example, in 3 years' time, I would get that skin. I would be able to get that. And well, it doesn't take away from yourself. You'd get it 3 years earlier. You'd get to flex it from the beginning for the first, 2-3 years. But over time, more and more people will get it, which does take a little bit away from it. So I do understand. But I think it also would give people an incentive to kind of maybe even keep playing and get these kind of rewards where it's like, oh, my 8th year's coming up next year. I get this reward. Can't wait. That is something that you could have looked at as a, and you can still do something like that. You could do what they're doing now and then also come back and add in a system like that too. But I am a little bit surprised they've gone this route. You look at, I know games like World of Warcraft have an issue right now where they've had items in the past that were released. I mean, geez, at this point, wow, so old. We're talking almost
50 years ago,
legitimately almost 20 years ago, that you maybe can't get anymore. And you think about the new age people, you could have an 18-year-old that just can't get an item in WoW because it came out when they were born. Like, that is legitimate. It's kind of insane to think about. And so there's been this kind of talk about, like, fairness about being able to I can't retroactively go get this item. That's not fair. It's not my fault I wasn't born. So they've actually started bringing back these old items and giving people a chance to kind of reacquire them. So I'm a little bit surprised Siege went this route. And I know obviously for you get to benefit, but I think there will be a small majority, that's going to be like, hey, this kind of sucks. We can't get this item.
I think that's fair. I didn't even think of it from that perspective, but I actually
of course you didn't.
I genuinely think that your take is valid. It probably should have been based on total time played or total years played. Maybe there's a limitation on how they track that. I don't know.
I mean, that way no one actually misses out. Like, no one's missing out at that. But you would still get your skin. Like, I would get it.
You can start playing now, and if the game in 10 years' time is still kicking, then you get that skin.
Yeah. Oh, well. Maybe it's not too late to change it. Maybe they can take my idea.
I don't think so, mate.
Look, it is still a plot. I like it overall. I'm not, I'm a 2018. Like, I'm still going to get some pretty cool fucking rewards. So new Flash sound effects options. This is an interesting one, actually, and I think a very positive one when it comes to accessibility in tactical FPS games. It's always quite tricky because it's a competitive game by nature. All of these FPS TAC games are competitive. Everyone needs to kind of be somewhat on the same footing. But you also have to take into account things like, so when you get Flash, you get this pure white screen. We've seen at times, talk of people wanting where it goes black instead, so that it's like a more dim experience. You're still getting Flash, but it doesn't have to be pure white. There's also then sound as well. When you get Flash, it's like the what is it? Tinnitus? I don't even know how you say it. Tinnitus.
Yeah, tinnitus.
You can get that kind of sound effect, and for a lot of people, it's quite jarring.
Oh, that's so great. Okay.
So that's just for you to talk about, because I haven't played it.
So yeah, this isn't something I don't believe they even mentioned in the reveal, but it is in the build. And when I was just scrolling through the menus a couple of weeks ago just to see if there was like anything new added. As far as I'm aware, this is basically the only thing that got added. We've had dark flashbangs or dark glare now for a little while. I run that because white when you're playing at 3 a.m. sucks. And so so they added these new SFX options. I tried both of them, silent and wave. The current tinnitus option is like that sound when you get Flash, where it's like that really piercing, like ringing kind of sound. You can now have silent, which is the exact opposite. You get flashed and you hear nothing. And when I mean nothing, nothing. So it's not a competitive advantage. It's not like the ring is gone and you can still hear footsteps. It's you get silence.
Is it a slight advantage though? Because you're not as disorientated IRL. I know to a very small degree.
Yeah. Maybe it's just less annoying. I don't think it's a competitive advantage. And then wave is like kind of a little bit more difficult to describe. I can't even fully remember it, but it's kind of like a hybrid where it's like you still have sound, but it's not like that piercing. It's more of like a, as the word would allude to, like a wave effect where it's kind of like sound comes in and out. It's a bit difficult to explain, but both of them are far less annoying than tinnitus, and I think they're well balanced and don't provide any competitive advantage. So just a nice little addition, and yeah, not much more to note.
How's this for segue? This is why I get paid the big bucks. Talking about advantages in this game, cheating is one way to get a big advantage. And it seems as if, of course, over the last, 12 to 18 months, there's been big initiatives when it comes to trying to eliminate a lot of the cheating in Siege, which I think I saw the reveal at Six Invitational. You may have seen from home.
Okay.
Regarding the success over, I think it looked, if I recall the top of my head, was it like the last 6 months or something, it has drastically improved compared to where it's
like
been
40% less reports.
Yeah, something ridiculous. Like, and it was all pretty recent. And I think that's going to be again an incentive that they want to continue on moving into Siege X.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing they mentioned, and this wasn't revealed to us during the roadshow, there were a couple of other initiatives that they kind of touched on, mainly just reiterations of what they already publicly talked about. But that is, live security updates without scheduled maintenance. So, I mean, going by the way they kind of explained it, they'll be able to release security patches without the game having to come down. It also gives less notice and foresight to cheat makers, and should mean that, they can just like, on a random fucking Tuesday afternoon, drop an update, and then the cheat maker's like, oh shit, we got caught with our pants down, which I think is an awesome way to go about it. Sounds like it's something they've worked really hard on being able to implement. I'm assuming, again, from a technical perspective, it's not that easy to just be able to drop anti-cheat updates like that. So it's cool, and hopefully it works. I mean, speaking from my own personal experience this season and last season, there's still the odd cheater running around here or there, but it has improved dramatically from seasons gone by. So hopefully it continues to go that way.
Yeah, I think that it's always going to be an evolving battle when it comes to cheating, and not just in Siege. I know we've had plenty of podcasts in the past where we talk about, this particular topic, and, it's rampant in a lot of, competitive games. That's just the nature of it, but it's really about who can continue to stay on top as long as possible. I know that kind of sounds weird, but like, it's always going to be a battle, right? Like, you're never going to end up in a situation where you eliminate cheating completely, and it's just a non-factor. Your best hope is to just kind of have a bit of a grasp on it and a bit of a handle on it, where you are sort of dominating the cheaters and dominating the cheat makers as much as possible, rather than a situation where I'd say probably a good 18, 24 months ago, the cheaters probably were on top in Siege, right, over the developers and over the cheat detections and things like that. They actually were running absolutely rampant, whereas that has now subsided quite substantially, which means that we're moving in the right direction. And I think little things like this, it doesn't seem like much, but when, there's scheduled maintenance, and if Ubisoft are talking about cheats and anti-cheat detection, that's the point in which these kind of cheat makers and cheaters go, okay, maybe don't play for a day or two. Let's just kind of get a feel for, or we'll play on different accounts or something for the first day, see if the cheats have been detected. Now that's a little bit more tricky, because you could just be playing on a random Wednesday night, and it's like they've done a certain update, and now suddenly your cheat is detectable and you get banned. Bye-bye, so.
And again, this links in with the introduction of live match bans as well. I think that's going to be a far more prominent tool that we're going to see implemented more, right? Because in between sessions or in between queue times, if the game gets updated, bang, you're just going to get nuked from the lobby.
Interesting.
There's going to be a lot more of it. Interesting
talking point here, because we're on the topic of cheats, and I think this is a kind of big one. What are your thoughts? And Rust, actually, of all games, has kind of just
oh god,
either done it or about to do it or speaking about it in the way that they're handling their cheater issue, and they've got a big one, which is that you they're thinking about bringing out particular servers. And I guess in Siege, this would basically apply to ranked, but they're bringing out servers where to play on the server, you must have an inventory value that is $15. Now, what's good about this is it's not that hard to go and spend $15 on a couple of skins and you can now play on these servers. If you get banned, it means you have to now spend $15 every single time on a new account to actually go and play on these servers. That adds up, right? So the cheaters are going to be less inclined to want to cheat on those particular servers. What if you made it in Siege where if you have, $15 to $20 of skin value, so it's not like you're not paying $15 a month, you're not paying $15 a year, you are literally just saying, I'm going to go buy one skin bundle, I can now go play ranked. Now, I know that's kind of tricky because not everyone not everyone can do that.
I'll just butt in here. So I mean, we can jump ahead to the free to play model, right? So that was announced at the showcase. Siege moving to free to play. Free to play has its limitations. Most notably, the competitive game modes are inaccessible to free accounts. So what we're going to see over the next couple of months is an uptick of second and cheat accounts buying up the game for cheap and then being able to access those modes when Siege X releases. There's not much you can do about that. But once it's finally out, you have I don't know if there's going to be other ways to access it, but they released that Siege X bundle, right? Like the Ash bundle with the charm and the skin and all that. That also gives you access to the competitive modes. That was $60 Australian. So if that's the only way to pay to enter into competitive modes as a new account under Siege X, I think that's fine. I think that's more than enough of a pay barrier to entry.
$60 is a lot. I mean, there's the...
Fuck it. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I think $60 is fair. If you can play the game for free for 50 levels and play get a decent amount of operators and play all of the modes except for ranked and Siege Cup, I think that is
Do you think it's going to help?
More than fair.
Do you think it's going to help with the cheater situation?
I mean, assuming there aren't, workarounds to get $2 accounts like there have been in the past, absolutely.
But I guess those $2 accounts, as long as the cheat detection is working and they're continuing to successfully
like I said,
ban
there's
them
going to be
out,
an uptick. The next couple of months, the cheaters aren't dumb. They're going to buy up cheap accounts now while the game's on sale on Steam for $5. But if and when, especially if the anti-cheat does keep up to date, those accounts are going to get wiped. And then it's going to be a $60 barrier of entry to cheat in the game. And I think that is more than fair. If you're at the point where you've played all 50 clearance levels, you're really enjoying the game and you want to play competitive, $60 is, I think, very fair to get access to the competitive modes.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of goes in what I was talking about with Rust, right? Like Rust is going in that or wanting to go in that fashion where it's like you have to have a certain inventory value to play on a certain server, which again, like Rust is similar, right? Where you can get a lot of these accounts for basically peanuts. So that's like the non-issue. When it comes to cheaters, they get banned, whatever. I'll pay $2, get an account. Now it's like, okay, from $2 every ban, now it's $15. And technically 17 if you include the really cheap account plus the inventory value. That now starts to add up. So from 10 bans used to be like, what, $20? Now you're looking at 170. So you're going to start to actually think about, where you're going to be cheating. And I think that's going to be, it's definitely, again, it goes into that discussion regarding cheats overall. And the topic of it is always, this is the fight. Sometimes you could have the best cheat detections. It's not going to grab everything. But if we make other ways, and in this case, you spend a little bit of extra money and you don't have to deal with cheaters, so, well, it's up to you whether or not you want to spend. There's going to be people out there that go like, I don't care enough and I don't want to spend the money. And so you might lose players, and that's fine. That's their decision and you got to respect that. Then you got other players, such as yourself, that would say, no, I'd rather spend the $60 and not have to deal with cheaters.
I should make it very, very clear. One, I don't know if you absolutely have to buy the $60 bundle. There could be other pricing models. They haven't talked about that, and I am not privy to that. Secondly, if you have an account now that can access ranked, you do not have to spend $60.
You have to pay to play Premier in CS.
Yeah, but in Siege, if you have access now, if you are on an account now, all of that transfers across to Siege. Yes,
exact same as CS.
All of your items, your rank status, you don't need to do anything. It is only people who get the game new and potential cheaters that are buying the game after the release of Siege X that need to worry about that upfront cost.
Same.
So
I don't know how much it costs.
Fine.
Let me have a look. CS2 Premier cost, because I know that it was the exact same thing. It used to be free.
I mean, I bought Premier back in ages ago.
So CS2 Prime status is $15. It's a one-time payment.
It should be more. There's way too many cheaters in CS.
Yeah, I don't see why that can't. I mean, I understand, of course, there are new players. Like there's this, little Timmy that's getting Counter-Strike for the first time, and he's only got to pay 15 versus say 30. But like the reality is, as you said, there's just far too many cheaters and a one-time cost. You're not paying like a $15 monthly. RuneScape and World of Warcraft, you pay $15-20 a month just to play the game. I think there's people out there. There's probably people out there that would pay $15-20 monthly to play a competitive game without cheaters.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating for that.
I'm not advocating. That's too much. But a one-time payment,
$60 one off,
anywhere from 30 to 60.
If you're new, like it's fine.
Yeah. But hey, at the very least, they're making good inroads and have been able to continue to make good inroads over the last 12 months, which is actually, in my mind, making me start to believe they can maybe continue to be winning the battle for the foreseeable future. So really big one here. Now, this was actually placed higher in our little schedule list, but I said, let's move it to the bottom. Let's save a big one here. The new ban phase system is the biggest change to competitive Siege in a long time. Outside of just seeing a new operator come in or a new map or map pull updates or whatever, this is quite huge. So overall, it's one extra ban each for both sides. So now there's 6 bans instead of 4. But it's also the way in which the bans take place, guys, that has changed massively. I want to get all of your thoughts on this when you first heard about it, your thoughts on it. Because for me, I'm quite indifferent. I need to see it in action. I don't know how, is this something you got to play test?
Yeah, so new ban system. I think I first heard about this actually from pro players at EWC. I think that had privileged information on this. I heard word about that. So this was like, I don't know, mid last year or whatever, about a revamped system, and it's going through a lot of feedback loops and iterations, etc. I mean, taking a step back, the ban phase at the moment, it sucks. Like, it's bad. One, it takes forever. 2, it's, in my opinion, pretty predictable and static. It doesn't actually lean itself into being as dynamic and tactical as it could be, and as the new system, I think, allows for. So it needed a revamp. I didn't get to play test it per se, but I was informed about what it would be. You've got the ranked system for bans, and there will be a variant for competitive, which I don't think is public. I don't even know if it's completely confirmed, so we'll have to wait and see how that plays out, because obviously competitive has more rounds, and so it doesn't one-to-one fit. The ranked system, though, for reference, at the moment, each team has an attacking ban and a defensive ban. They're all done before the game. They stay the same. Now you get one ban which is performed simultaneously with the other team for each round. So before round 1, if you're attacking, you get to ban 1 defender. If you're defending, you get to ban 1 attacker. It's all done at the same time. I think it's 10 seconds. Overall, the actual ban phase over the course of the match will actually now be faster, which is great. Then at halftime, it resets, you flip sides, and you do the same thing after each round. So essentially, the new system rewards more dynamic gameplay, right? If there's a blitz main on the other team that you're unaware of and they're starting to stomp you after the first or second round, well, then you can ban it out for the 3rd round, right? Yeah, overall, I think it's a great system. I've seen some people, complain and say it's shit. And I think that the majority of the people saying that are probably one tricks that when their operator gets banned, are going to crack the shits. And to those people, I would say, learn to adapt. That's honestly one of the most important skills in this game. And I think the ban system reinforces that, which is good to see.
The people saying that, though, is that from an esports background, or is that more just plain casual?
Well, not casual, but a ranked background. Yeah. I'm talking about like the Ash Doc mains who, when you ban out those operators, those crutches, that they're going to feel unfairly done by.
Was this communicated in the reveal that it's for esports? I can't recall.
Yeah, the ban system will be implemented, but it's because of because it's not a 3-3 half, the implementation will likely be different. I don't know if it's confirmed. I definitely don't think it's public. So
right, but some kind of iteration likely.
But it will have a dynamic. It will have an iteration of the dynamic ban system where the bans take place over the course of the match. Yes. I
mean, I think that if you look historically at a lot of competitive games that have ban systems, like I recall, like League of Legends back in the day, it used to be, firstly no bans, and then it's like, okay, now 1, then 2, then 3, and now it's like Now don't they do a system where it's like it's ban, but then it's like you do a whole bunch of picks and then ban again and then picks to
It's
like
very convoluted. It takes forever.
Yeah, and it takes absolutely forever. It's almost
That's the one thing I hate about League, man. The ban phase takes like 5 to 10 minutes before the game, it feels like. It is so long. And that was my biggest concern. I think immediately when they presented this ban system in Tokyo, it was like, fuck, this is going to add more downtime, isn't it? But in reality, because the bans are simultaneous, which in a way is a limitation and a critique that I have seen, like the attack now can only ban defenders and that could lead to potential issues. But in terms of the overall downtime, it actually is now better, which is good. So they've actually kind of killed two birds with one stone. One
of the biggest things I know that you personally wanted to see was something similar to Counter-Strike, where you kind of just, when we throw, when I say we, I'm talking about the esports broadcast, when we throw from the desk to the casters and the ability to get straight into the game. Is that possible with this new system, or is that just not going to be possible? Like, we're going to have to throw the casters straight into the first round and then ban, and then we get to begin.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be similar. It'll just be a bit quicker. It'll be throw to game, straight into the round 1 ban phase, whatever that looks like in comp, we'll see. But I mean, using ranked as the basis, it will be 1 ban per side.
Yeah.
So it's a lot faster. You'll get into the prep phase a lot quicker. It'll just be same but different, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, which is probably still somewhat of a small positive. You know, the irony is I think actually there could have been a really good way in which with the old system, and it was something that we kind of like perpetrated a little bit behind the scenes of like, should the analyst desk do the ban phase and then we throw to casters and then kind of just get straight into the game? I think that's something that we'll never actually probably get to know.
Won't be needed.
Won't be needed now. But yeah, I'm curious to see how it works from an actual strategical point of view, less so the system itself. I think the dynamic ban phase itself is probably going to be a good thing and work out fine. It's going to come down to how, because like, I'm looking at this entirely from an esports perspective. I mean, I know for yourself and a lot of the viewers, they may look at it from a ranked perspective, but ultimately from an esports perspective, do you think that this could actually allow teams to be more strategical and even for coaches to be more strategical in the banning process as we, you know, are going to see a big change? Everyone's going to have to adapt to it.
Yeah, I mean, my hope will be, or it may not play out this way, both for ranked and competitive, is that, especially, I guess, firstly for ranked, is it leads to less just like autopilot bans. Like 90% of ban phases in ranked are the same operators every single time, regardless of the map. It gets boring, repetitive, and I would rather not sit through that.
Unless it's a target ban.
The start of the game.
Like Shaiko Deimos.
Unless it's a target ban because you're running R6 tracker and the other team's got a blitz main. That's like the only exception. Or you've played them in the last ranked game, which happens a lot in Australia. I actually had a stack we played against last night. They had a blitz main, so we ran the blitz next match. But that's like the only example of where the ban phase is dynamic. And I don't think that just patching it with a band-aid and adding an extra ban at the start of the match would have done much. And it would have just made the ban phase longer and more boring and tedious.
What do you think about the fact that it is going to be now technically an extra ban both sides? Like, that's like it's 6 overall now.
Yeah, I think it will be okay. I mean, obviously there are some concerns that you could enter a situation where lobbies have all primary hard breaches banned, like you see or the majority of them banned. Let's say you have like an Ace, Habana, Thermite ban, and then you're forced onto the Mav or something, or secondary hard breach that could cause limitations. So I could foresee that being a potential issue.
Until they bring out a new hard breach or something.
Yeah. Well, is that a leak? I don't...
No, absolutely not. I mean, like, the thing is, like, back in the day, though, you could almost do that, like, really far back in the day before they actually brought out new operators like Ace, for example, right? So, like, it kind of may go back to that ever so slightly, even with, like, soft breach, for example. Like, I remember, like, saying you can't ban out all of the hard breach, right? So why even bother unless it's, you know, certainly dependent on the site. But now that you're going to get to, you know, ban out 3, it's like, do you even think about this and how it kind of plays out with the dynamic ban phase? I don't think so.
I don't think the game is not in a state where it would be like absolutely devastating for the defense to absolutely devastating for the attack to lose all 3.
I think it's just going to give an opportunity to ban out more of the so-called oppressive operators.
Yeah, again, and then I think that does raise a valid criticism potentially of this system, where especially it favors defense, right? Because now in the current system, at least when you ban an operator, it's also banned for yourself in the next half. Under the new system, it resets at halftime, right? Otherwise, at the end of a match, you would have 12 operators banned, and that would be completely insane, of course. It would be a mess. So this system now, some may believe that it's just going to lead to the case of just the most OP operators always getting banned. I'm critical of that approach. I think that in most cases, there isn't always a one-size-fits-all ban. Maybe for the first ban, maybe for the pre-round 1 ban, there might be like, I think a common example cited is like Azami on Chalet, right? That one kind of makes sense because she's really oppressive on that map. But I don't think there's like a set in stone round 2 and round 3 ban. It's going to be dependent on, well, what site did the defenders play first, right? If they played basement first, well, maybe they're going to have to go to top floor, and that's going to change your decision making for the second round. Yeah. That's going to change what operator you want to ban out. Maybe they have brought out some like crazy pocket pick, like I don't know, something stupid that you wouldn't expect. And you're like, well, fuck, we don't want to play into that. So let's just ban that in the second round. I think in theory, it is going to lead to a more dynamic tactical approach to the game.
Yeah.
It may lead to it leaning itself a little bit heavy towards defense, especially early while people understand the system. But my hope will be that overall it's a positive, it's faster, and again, there'll be room for changes, I suppose, if necessary as well.
I mean, I know we kind of touched on it here, but I do want to go to Gabrielle's question from our Patreon. Of course, she's kind of just asked, will this new change in operator bans reduce the operator's variety or create even more target bans in competitive? I think we kind of touched on that a little bit, but I guess to close on that question specifically, Guzz, kind of your thoughts pertaining to that directly.
Yeah, I mean, in competitive specifically, we'll have to wait and see what the ban format actually looks like and how it operates. I think it's going to depend on like just team approaches and matchups. I don't really, I'm not a big believer that every single ban phase is just going to be the same against every single opponent, regardless of like meta or map or whatever. I think it is going to lend itself into being a little bit more dynamic and reactive to what's actually happening inside of the server. At least that's my hope. We'll have to wait and see what the data looks like. I don't think that bans right now are particularly interesting. You do see some teams get creative and they are dynamic and very much vary on matchup. But again, a lot of the time, especially in one-sided matchups, you'll see that the stronger team just do the exact same bans every single time. I think now though, there's going to be a little bit more room for creativity and actually reward teams that can be more dynamic on the fly. So it may reduce variety a little bit of the absolute most OP operators. They probably will continue to get insta-banned in the first round, but I think from that point onwards, it is actually going to then lead to more targeted bans based on site and based on what operators are actually having impact inside of the match. If you are finding it difficult to counter a particular player or a particular operator, or maybe you're anticipating a site setup to come, then your homework will be rewarded, especially at the competitive level.
Move on from the ban phase system. Communication wheel was shown in the reveal as well. Thoughts on this? Whether was it needed in Siege?
I mean, I wouldn't say it was absolutely necessary, but I think it's a nice addition for those who can't or don't want to speak, especially in ranked. I think it's a nice addition and offers the tools to be able to coordinate with the team instead of just like spamming a yellow ping with zero context. So I think it will be helpful in that regard. And even, I mean, for myself personally, if I'm playing like quick match at 3 a.m. and I just want to be able to ask somebody to EMP something or whatever, it'd be nice to have that addition. So I think it's great. It also pops up with the message in team chat as well. So maybe if you can't physically see the ping, you at least know there's something on the map that you need to be mindful of. And yeah, it's a nice evolution of yellow ping, in my opinion. Yep. I don't really see too many downsides, to be honest.
The rappel sprinting and swinging, which we saw, and I think got a pretty big pop from the crowd when it actually did get showcased on the reveal, and the momentum update, no ADS when falling. These are all just, I think, quite substantial movement updates for a game that, in my honest opinion, compared to other tactical shooters, probably hasn't had the best movement.
Janky.
Very, very janky. And hopefully it's just a really good step in the right direction in being able to make it a little bit more fluid to move around the map, right? So that's going to be something where it's a good basis to start with, starting with things like the rappel, which I think, you even had I can't recall, was it about a year ago now that, remember the Repel update where it was just faster, a bit more fluid, so now you're adding on to that. You think back to the old Repel and how slow and janky it was to where it will be now in Siege X. Like, it's come quite leaps and bounds, and I hope eventually then a lot of this can be translated to just even generalized movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Siege has been in a pretty fierce tug of war since inception of trying to balance fluidity and competitiveness. I mean, you think back to like 2018 when you first played the game, right? You could fucking crouch spam and lean spam and it was just an absolute mess. They've slowed that down and then maybe in the process janked the movement a little bit. That being said, it's not like these changes are really addressing things like that. It is more so like vaulting and falling. It's a little bit smoother. Repel, you can sprint across. I will note it doesn't feel that fast. I don't think it looked that fast either, unless I've tampered with it. But again, just allows you to be a bit more dynamic. Swinging around corners 90 is going to be a massive change. Going to be far more enjoyable to attack Skyscraper and Cafe now, even like a bank lobby, for instance, because it's just going to be far less janky, which is really, really nice. So I like that. And then, yeah, sort of as you briefly touched on, they've now changed no ADS while falling. You know, I think you have to fall from a height higher than vaulting. So like if you jump out CEO windows on bank, you can't just like ADS down and spray whoever's on the windows.
Top red hats on Cafe falling down and being able to just prone shoot.
Probably the same. So I think especially at high levels of play, that's actually going to be a pretty dramatic change. I quite like it. And I think it's going to appease the crowd that are convinced they're in a TDM meta as well, even though I probably disagree with that sentiment. I can kind of understand it. Should contain more fights to inside of the building and provide fairer opportunities to defenders, especially because those dropping animations can lead to some really weird like instances where you get fucked because of the animations. So I like that changes, and just overall more fluidity to the movement is appreciated without negatively impacting the gameplay. We don't want to get to the point where it's like Counter-Strike. I don't think it would work very well in this game where people are literally like sliding around. That would be one step too far, but yeah, we'll see if they take this further with anything else. Yeah, I will say it did feel a little bit differently. I actually didn't know about these changes specifically when I played the build, and I noticed like when you were vaulting or falling, it felt a bit weird, but it makes sense now knowing this context.
We get towards the end a little bit here, red enemy outlines and sort of what that is going to entail. I mean, does this just kind of fall under accessibility in terms of the visibility?
So as far as I could find, and maybe I didn't look hard enough, there is no ability to toggle these outlines off or on. I very much could be wrong on this, so maybe I missed it, maybe it's been added, maybe it will be added. But essentially, for those unaware, there will now be a rather distinct red outline around enemies, and part of that is to balance out the lighting changes, I believe.
Was this in the playtest that you played?
Yeah, and also in 6v6 mode, because you're playing against the full roster, it makes it a little bit easier to distinguish who's who, so that kind of makes sense. I don't think it has a place in 5v5, especially in its
I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing, because I still...
Wait till you play it. No.
Oh, really?
I promise you, it looks way less prominent on stream than it does when you play, and it's to the point where, I'm not someone who's going to sit here and complain about...
You can tone it down.
No, you can't. That's what I'm saying. There's no setting to change it.
No, I mean, I'm not saying you personally. I'm saying Ubisoft can tone it down. Like, I'm saying they can tone it down.
And like, to be clear, I'm not complaining about this from the perspective of immersion. That is not my number one concern. I care more so about the competitiveness of the game. But in a counterintuitive way, the red outline, to me, especially at medium to long range, it was so thick and so bright that it was actually difficult to distinguish who you're shooting at, like what specific operator, and like determining body parts. It looks like you're just shooting a red blob.
It just needs work then. But like, so regardless of what the state that it's in now,
if they tone it down and add an option to toggle it off, fine, it's cool. I like that. One thing as well to note that I don't think I touched on, and I noticed when playing, is that cameras now also have a permanent red light to them if they're enemy cameras. So you know how currently when somebody jumps on a camera, you see it flash. The flashing is still there, but there's like a subtle light on all cameras now.
Okay.
Which is okay, I guess. Probably makes it a bit more accessible for people to understand, like, cameras are there. it's not like they're intended to be hidden to begin with. So
I still remember countless nights where I've done a little bit too much team killing at times, and so Siege definitely can be a game where even your own teammates might sneak up on you, and you just get completely bamboozled. If they adjust the outlines, and if there's enough community sentiment, I imagine they will. I don't have for me, I don't have an issue, and if anything, I consider it a positive that the system is being implemented as long as it's done well. So if it's not done well at the moment,
yeah, I agree.
Then I think it's like, okay, you got to go back, tune that, fix that. But I think that's definitely that can't be that difficult. If there's enough community uproar, then I think
I feel like they delivered it very delicately in the presentation and said that they're open to feedback, which they typically do with controversial changes.
Which is good.
Surprisingly, I haven't seen a lot of people complain about it. I think in 6v6 though, it's a lot more logical, and once you get in 5v5, you'll notice that it can be fucking annoying. So
right.
Again, if they add like an option for opacity or something, that would pretty much instantly make me feel better about it. But it is something I'm noting as being potentially problematic. When people start complaining about it, if and when they're able to test 5v5, I don't know if that's possible, but if they are, I think we'll see more people start to complain about it. But again, I feel like I'm picking at pretty minute.
Yeah, I mean we're at that point.
Like, I'm complaining about the branding and like red outlines. Like we're kind of finding things to whinge about, but I mean I just am going to be honest.
Yeah. So we've kind of wrapped up everything when it comes to Siege X. What we now know as well is that Reload, the next event for the esports ecosystem and to essentially kickstart off the 2025 campaign, will be on Siege X. Do you envision that it's going to cause issues, that it's going to be an event with rehosts galore and
oh shit. I mean, look, let's be real, probably, right? I mean, it's going to be the first time that this game is going to be played in a competitive environment. The Siege build that is played on LAN events is different to the retail build as well, so there's probably going to be issues that need to be ironed out, especially in regards to like observer slots and API integration and everything like that. Keep in mind as well, it's going to be the first time that we see the new ban phase played out and whatever the competitive iteration of that will be. So that could lead to potential issues. But that's looking at it from a glass sort of half empty. I think we're looking at it from a glass half full perspective. An event that, to be honest, is not that super exciting on the surface, being only partnered teams, now actually has some life breathed into it. This is the first time we're going to see Siege X 5v5 properly played out in the public arena. The best players, or some of, arguably the best players in the world playing.
It will be a proper showcase.
All the new features you're going to have, I assume at that point in time, 5 of the 9 competitive maps fleshed out. I wish it was more, but we'll have to make do with that for now. So yeah, it's going to make the event more exciting than it otherwise would have been, in my opinion.
As we get kind of towards the end of this podcast, which has well and truly become our longest podcast that we've ever put together, are there any features that you wish were essentially added in with the Siege X update? That's the question to you. I'll think of some as well while you maybe go through. If there's anything
I saw this come up in the Runner Show about half an hour ago, and I've been thinking ever since. I mean, I guess just going back quickly to the point that we made before, it'd be really nice to see both volumetric smokes be added to the game, or some kind of upgrade to smokes to make them more dynamic and more realistic and actually provide more tactical opportunities, especially with fire extinguishers now in the game.
Knife inspector, knife skins.
Knife inspector, knife skins. Okay, degenerate. Coinciding with gas pipes as well. It'd be nice to see the flame animation rejuvenated as well. I guess maybe more dynamic, map elements would be nice as well. We didn't touch on beepers, but of course beepers are now going to be interactable with a bunch of different stuff, so that's cool. You could potentially take that a step further with more stuff. What that would actually look like, I don't quite know. It's tough. I feel like I'm pretty content with this update. I mean, I think I do share some of the disappointment with stuff like there only being 5 maps refreshed at launch and then 3 per season beyond that. It would have been awesome to have at least all 9 competitive maps ready to go at launch, and then the ranked maps to follow by the end of the year. But again, I want to make it very clear, like they worked on what 5 plus this plus all the other maps. It's like, for argument's sake, it's like 6 maps at launch, and one of them is the largest ever, and they've been working on that for a few years. Like it's only a few months a map, and they've basically been built again from the ground up, at least texturally.
And since then, they brought out operators, they brought out lair.
Exactly. They haven't. Yeah. Yes, some of the content did decline, and we noted that, but it's not like they went completely silent for 3 years. Like they're still working and maintaining a live game at the same time. So I think we have to measure expectations.
What does that then mean for
it would just be nice to have more maps?
The future of Siege, right? Like, does that then mean now that Siege X is out, that the resources that we've seen go to it behind the scenes now kind of comes back to the forefront? Are you anticipating over the next couple of years that we're going to not have those droughts again, and that it is going to be full blown? Like I'm not saying we got to go back to having 2 operators every release cycle, because otherwise we're just going to flood the game. But like, are you expecting more moving forward now over the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, I did get shared to me what the actual release schedule will be going forward. It's not public, so I can't talk about it. To be frank, I actually can't. I literally can't remember the specifics anyway, but I think the anticipation is that we go back to more regular scheduled updates.
You can leave it at that.
Again, I literally can't remember specifics, but my hope would be that we get at least like one good solid map per year, right? Like you think to like the addition of Nighthaven Labs, awesome. Lair, great. If we can keep following up with banger maps like that over the next, one per year for the next few years, and really flesh out the pool and get rid of some of the fucking shit maps that are still in rank that need to be nuked, I'll be very happy. That honestly, for me, that would be one of the biggest additions, not with the launch of Siege X, but over the next 12 to 24 months, give us some good quality new maps.
I wanted to do a little tester here as well, going back to that previous question regarding features that you wish were added. For loyal viewers that have made it this far, almost a solid 90 minutes in, let us know in the comments down below what you wish was added into Siege, or if you don't really have anything else that you want to, just let us know that you've kind of made it this far. And if you like the podcast, let us know, and we'll see you in the comments, and we'll know you watched the whole thing.
You're
or
OG.
You just happened to click at this point and you watched the last 5 minutes and you hopped in. Either way, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Last one before we kind of close. I mentioned regarding a bit of the content over the next 2-3 years. It's been 10 years of Siege, guys. Will we get another 10? Will we get Siege XX in 2035?
Do I think Siege has the potential to last another 10 years? Absolutely. There's only 2 worlds I envision in which Siege ceases to exist. One would be if another company wanted to execute a similar game and blew Siege out of the water, and that would only come from the likes of like a Riot or an EA or whatever, someone with the resources and the manpower to do it. And I don't really see either of them doing that. Siege has built itself such a wide moat. It is such a technically, specific.
It's also
and
very
unique
niche
game, and very niche. Like it's easier said than done to make a game like Siege that's better, as much as people want to say
people copy
it is.
People copy games like MOBAs, battle royales, hero shooters, because they're either widely successful.
If it was going to be copied by now and beat Siege, it would have been done. It would have been done by now, and it hasn't. You do have games that have filled the market in other niches, like Ready or Not with single player, still nowhere near as popular as Siege, never will be. So in terms of direct competition, it's possible, but highly unlikely. And then the only other doomsday scenario is, especially with Ubisoft and their financial performances recently, maybe Ubisoft as a company could cease to exist, and with it Siege. Again, highly doubt that will be the case if they are to be bought out. Siege is the golden goose, right? And it's going to get preferential treatment. So I don't think either of those scenarios are particularly likely. And then I guess obviously the third and the most natural one is just the game naturally dies off.
Slowly,
but I think we hit a record player count.
I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised.
Late last year, so I think we're cruising. I think I am incredibly confident that we will be here for another 10 years.
Yeah,
and that's why I am excited.
And what that 10 years kind of looks like, it doesn't necessarily mean that in 10 years it's either bigger or worse. Like, we don't know. Like, it could be it could be here in 10 years, but it might not. It might have half the player base.
For sure.
It might be very much slowly on its deathbed, or in 10 years it could be the biggest FPS game. Like, you just don't really know, because if you were to go back 10 years ago and ask, or, let's just say 9 or, let's say 8, 9 years ago, right? So a little bit after the launch of Siege. And I had said,
2016. Let's just say 2016.
Yeah, let's say 2016.
If you had have asked me in 2016, is Siege going to live or die? 100% I would have said die. You were talking about a game where you could not even get into a 5-stack and queue 95% of the time. If you played in 2016, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The game didn't even work. Like, it was just completely broken. But then they did a major update, Operation Health. They're doing something similar here with X. And I think the new players it will bring in and old players returning will serve the game well into the future.
Yeah. Well, it's been a fantastic episode, guys. I think we've really hit the nail on the head in terms of Siege X moving forward. Of course, Reload not quite around the corner, so there's certainly a little bit of that off season, if you will. But I think what we are going to be able to do over whether it, I'm not saying next week, but over the next coming weeks or so, as we get a little bit more of an understanding regarding like roster changes and as all of that kind of comes to the forefront, we will be able to hopefully put some episodes out pertaining to like the preseason, and then going into things like Reload, we can do like prediction, and all our thoughts going on into the future of the esports ecosystem. And of course, as Siege X continues to kind of unravel a little bit with like play tests and, as the game releases, I think we're going to have plenty of content to be able to put out over the next few months when it comes to this channel. So again, if you did enjoy this podcast, if you did enjoy the content, same with the previous episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It means a lot, helps us out a lot. The like button as well. Comments down below, we read them, and I know, Guzz, at times you get in there as well and reply to a few of them, which is great. So, let us know your thoughts. And of course, we've still got the Patreon that we always give a shout out to. Big thank you, big love to all of our current patrons. But as always, we come to a close. That was episode 32, our biggest and hopefully best episode yet, guys. Big thank you again to Ubisoft with the paid collaboration.
The weight is off my shoulders. The weight is off my
kind
shoulders.
of. There's still some weight there. You got a little.
Well, I'm still NDA for some stuff.
Yeah, you still got a little bit. But thank you again so much to Ubisoft for allowing us to kind of be involved when it comes to Siege X. And we cannot wait to see how this is going to play out, both esports, but also just the game in general. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed the reveal, enjoyed the podcast, and is very much looking forward to playing Siege X, and then eventually looking forward to Reload. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye-bye.